I wrestled all over this country. And any place that we went, I don't care, little towns like Beckley, West Virginia, we draw 15,000 people. Zanesville, Ohio, 10,000 people. Sometime it would nearly be as big as a town. They just came from all over. And we knew that TV was, you know, the thing that really did it. The exposure and the people seeing us. But again, you know, the individual had to have something unique in order to draw that kind of money and draw that type of people.
People think back to that era and the name Gorgeous George pops up, but he was kind of an exception, wasn't he, in terms of a guy who depended on...
George started in 1947, and in fact, there was a lot of promoters didn't want to handle Gorgeous George. They all thought it was a disgrace to wrestling for a guy to come in there with bleached hair and rolled up gold bobby pins and the flary robes he had. Well, even I was one that I thought it was a cardinal sin to see this guy walk in the ring, but let me tell you something. Gorgeous George drew more money in the 7-year period than even I did. He made $9 million in 7 years. So I have to say this, I don't care how you make it as long as you make it.
But he was an exception. Most of the guys in your era were more, you know, pure wrestlers.
Yes, true. But we all hated the fact that George was making a lot more money than we were. But let's face it, today you got a lot of guys that are emulating Gorgeous George, you know, in the different robes and everything that he done, but they aren't drawing his kind of money. He was one of his kind.
Yeah. What kind of life was it? Were you able to travel by plane, or was it a rough grind moving on?
Well, at the start, we started like anyone else. Down the bottom, drove cars and trains and buses. Later on, when there was big money, we lived first class. And I made 14 trips around the world, and I lived first class all the way. So the promoters paid for it. I made sure I got my share of it.
Well, I was going to ask you, when you get to the top in that business then, are you pretty much your own guy, or do you have management telling you where to wrestle, where to go?
Some fellows have managers. I was fortunate enough to handle myself, and I would do business with the different booking agents throughout the country, and I knew where I was going the next month. I'd always be a month or two in advance knowing where I was going.
Mm-hmm. And you were loving, really enjoying it?
Oh, loved it.
And the career...
Wrestling was my whole life.
And the career spanned a little over 20 years.
It sure did.
And ended when?
63, May 29th.
How?
Well, I waited a long time to bring this up, but I'm going to let it out to the public. I never said this to anyone else. I must have had thousands of people say to me, buddy, how did Bruno Sammartino ever beat you? Well, I'm going to give it to him right now. 6 weeks before, I had already signed for the match in Madison Square Garden with Sammartino. 6 weeks before that, I went in Georgetown University Hospital with a heart attack. I was in that hospital up till 5 days before I wrestled Sammartino. Now, you know what kind of shape I was in, but I made sure that I kept my word. I went through with that match. Any 15-year-old kid could have beat me that night that I went in that ring. Believe me, I had pains in my chest walking to the ring, just the excitement. But it's over with now. But to all those that wondered how Bruno could ever beat me, that's what went wrong. And what was wrong, that he did beat me.
And after that, the doctors just told you to forget it?
After that, I told myself to forget it. Yeah, school was out. I knew it was all done. I just knew I couldn't produce like I did. But I kept my word. I went in that ring.
So now...
Prior to that, in a period of 2 years, I defeated Sammartino 11 straight times. So, as far as I was concerned, Bruno never stood a chance with me. In my prime, before I got my heart attack, I guarantee you, Bruno never stood a chance with me.
It had to be awfully, not only a concern now about your health, which will scare the daylights out of anybody, but all of a sudden now your glorious career goes from here to there. And
it's a transition. You can't explain it. All is what it is. It really takes you down. It's something that you spent your whole life in this particular field, and all of a sudden, in fact, it was my whole life. All of a sudden, it's no more. You don't get another penny out of that field. You don't have anything to do with that field. Imagine you doing something all them years and loving it, and all of a sudden, you never do it again.
Well, forgetting the economics even, how about the roar of the crowd and the entertaining part?
Everything, as far as that business was concerned, it was the hardest thing in my life for me to go out of wrestling. I didn't get as great in wrestling as I did by not loving it. It was my whole life. I can't explain it.
Mm-hmm.
But you take it from me, it's the toughest. The two toughest jobs in my life was climbing in that ring with Sammartino, coming out of intensive care, and knowing I could never wrestle again after that. Right. So they were my two toughest jobs.
Well, going back to the happier times during your career, certain things must stand out, and one of them has to be the match in Chicago where you got 41,000 people in.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the greatest moment of my life in wrestling, knowing that I drew the largest crowd in the history of wrestling and knowing I was world champion. So I held every sectional title in the entire United States. In fact, for 11 years I was the United States champion. But it wasn't the world's title. Now I've got the world's title.
Were you a good guy or a bad guy, or wasn't there such a thing?
In my day, one town would love you and the other town would hate you. So, and if you were in my category where you were always in the top 2, 3, or champion, naturally they hated you. They wanted the underdog to win, so they'd root against you.
And you invented some things in holds.
Yeah. Well, the two holds that you'll see highly and mainly used in wrestling right today is the atomic drop and the figure 4 grapevine. I invented both of them.
Going now, the career's over, and you're going through this period of adjustment. How long did it take before you could kind of snap out of it and get on with,
A couple of years. Yeah, it took that long. Really did.
What were you doing with yourself during that time? Pouting?
No, I'd go to the gym and I'd work out. And at the time when my heart was bad, right after the Sammartino match, I couldn't work out and I could just lay around. And it was tough. It was really tough. I just can't explain it. I had nothing to do but just sit around and reminisce.
Well, how did you finally get yourself out of the doldrums?
Well, after a couple of years of sitting around, I guess, feeling sorry for myself, I accumulated the idea I want to get into business. And the first venture I went into, I bought a drive-in liquor store, and I built a nightclub alongside of it. And for a while, during the time I had that, I bought some apartments in Haddon Heights, and I ran apartments. In fact, 62 of them. And a little after that, I bought a mobile home park from a fellow that was very close to me.